There's a moment in every bad decision where reality tries to warn you. A flicker of doubt, a whisper of consequence, a chance to step back from the edge before gravity takes over. Officer Anthony Pate ignored every single warning. On a fog-drenched November night on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, Pate pulled over a woman driving alone on Highway 26. She was black. She was confident. And when she told him she was FBI, he laughed in her face. He didn't just dismiss her credentials. He mocked them, called them cute, suggested she bought them at a costume shop. And when she calmly warned him that he was making a career-ending mistake, he responded by reaching for his handcuffs. What Officer Anthony Pate didn't know, what his arrogance wouldn't let him see, was that the woman sitting in that BMW wasn't just an FBI agent. She was Special Agent Rebecca Drago, the lead investigator on a federal task force that had been watching his precinct for 6 months. A task force investigating corruption, civil rights violations, and a pattern of abuse that had been buried under paperwork and protected by a sheriff who thought he was untouchable. Pate's dash cam was recording. Rebecca's body camera was recording. And 400 miles away in a federal operations center, 12 analysts were watching the traffic stop in real time, waiting to see if Officer Pate would do exactly what they suspected he would do. He did. And what happened next wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong. It was the detonation that brought down an entire house of cards. This is the story of a cop who thought his badge made him invincible, a federal agent who became the bait in her own trap, and the moment when laughing at the wrong person cost a man everything. Before we begin, I need you to stop right here and hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a masterclass in what happens when power meets accountability. This is going to get intense. This is going to make you angry. And by the end, it's going to make you believe that sometimes, just sometimes, justice actually works. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because the problem in this story, it's not local, it's national. Now let's get into it. Portland, Oregon, November 14th, 11:47 p.m. The fog rolling in from the Columbia River Gorge was thick enough to taste. A cold, wet blanket that turned headlights into useless halos and made the painted lines on Highway 26 disappear into gray nothing. Oh no, it was the kind of night where smart people stayed home, where the only vehicles on the road were long-haul truckers fighting sleep and the occasional drunk trying to make it home before their luck ran out. Special Agent Rebecca Drago was neither drunk nor tired. She was working. At 39 years old, Rebecca had spent 16 years with the FBI, the last 8 in the Civil Rights Division. She'd investigated police shootings in Ferguson, corruption rings in New Orleans, and excessive force complaints in a dozen cities whose names only made national news when someone died. She had a law degree from Yale, a master's in criminology from Georgetown, and a reputation within the Bureau as someone who didn't just build cases, she built fortresses. Airtight, unassailable. The kind of cases that made defense attorneys quit before trial, on their span of a single sentence. Tonight, she span of a single sentence. Tonight she wore civilian clothes, a black turtleneck, dark jeans, and a leather jacket that concealed the Glock 22 holstered at her hip. Her FBI credentials were in the center console. Her badge was clipped to her belt, hidden under the jacket. She was driving a rented BMW 540i, a nice car, but not ostentatious. The kind of vehicle a successful professional might drive. The kind of vehicle that, in the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time of night, might get pulled over by a cop looking for an easy bust. That was the point. For 6 months, the FBI's Portland field office had been running an operation called Nightfall, a covert investigation into the Washington County Sheriff's Department, specifically the night shift officers who patrolled Highway 26 between Portland and the coastal towns. The complaints had been piling up for years. Excessive force, illegal searches, racial profiling, and a disturbing pattern of young women, mostly Black and Latina, being pulled over late at night and subjected to invasive searches that were never documented, never reported, and never prosecuted. The local DA had refused to investigate. The sheriff had dismissed the complaints as malcontents with an agenda, and the Portland Police Bureau, already under federal oversight for its own issues, had no jurisdiction over the county. So the FBI had stepped in quietly. They'd planted surveillance. They'd interviewed victims. And they'd discovered something worse than isolated bad cops. They'd discovered a culture, a system where the worst officers were protected, where complaint files disappeared, and where victims were too scared to come forward because they knew nothing would happen. Rebecca's job tonight was simple. Be the bait. She was driving alone, late at night, in a nice car, on a stretch of highway, where Officer Anthony Pate had been cited in 17 excessive force complaints over 5 years, none of which had resulted in discipline. The plan was to see if Pate would take the bait. See if he'd pull her over on a pretense. See if he'd follow his pattern. And if he did, Rebecca would identify herself, assert her rights, and document everything. The Bureau wanted evidence. They wanted Pate on camera, on the record. I was recording everything. Front view was recording everything. Front view, interior view, audio. Backup was 8 minutes away. 2 unmarked SUVs with a tactical team parked at a rest stop 5 miles back, monitoring her GPS in real time. She was safe. This was controlled. And then, as if summoned by the script, blue and red lights exploded in her mirror. Rebecca's heart rate didn't spike. She'd been in firefights in Juarez. She'd been held at gunpoint by a trafficking ring in Tampa. A traffic stop didn't scare her. But it should have, because Officer Anthony Pate wasn't just a bad cop. He was a predator. And tonight, he thought he'd found easy prey. Rebecca pulled over smoothly, on signaling even though there was no other traffic, easing the BMW onto the narrow shoulder. Gravel crunched under the tires. The fog was so thick, she could barely see the tree line 10 feet away. She put the car in park, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. She rolled down her window halfway, enough for communication, not enough for him to reach in easily. The patrol car sat behind her for 45 seconds before the door opened. That was deliberate. It was a tactic designed to make the driver nervous, to make them start second-guessing themselves, to make them fidget. Rebecca didn't move. Finally, Officer Anthony Pate emerged. He was tall, 6'3", with the kind of build that suggested he'd been a high school linebacker and had kept lifting weights but stopped doing cardio. His uniform was crisp, despite the late hour, his boots polished. He wore his hat low, casting his face in shadow, and his hand rested casually on his service weapon as he approached. He didn't use a flashlight. He didn't walk to the passenger side to check for threats. He walked directly to Rebecca's window, too close, invading the space in a way that was designed to intimidate. "License and registration," Pate said without preamble. No good evening. No explanation for the stop. Rebecca kept her hands on the wheel. "Good evening, officer. Can you tell me why you pulled me over?" "License and registration," Pate repeated, his voice hardening. "I'd like to know the reason for the stop first," Rebecca said calmly. "I wasn't speeding. My taillights are functional. I signaled when I changed lanes 3 miles back. Well, what's the probable cause?" Pate leaned down, bringing his face closer to her window. She could see him now, mid-40s, weathered face, eyes that were scanning her car's interior with the kind of predatory interest that had nothing to do with traffic safety. "You got a lot of questions for someone who should be cooperating," Pate said. "Makes me think you got something to hide. Now, license and registration. Last time I'm asking nice." Rebecca took a slow breath. This was already off script. Legally, she had the right to know why she'd been stopped. His refusal to answer was a red flag. My license is in my purse on the passenger seat, Rebecca said. I'm going to reach for it now. My movements will be slow and deliberate. Go ahead, Pate said, and Rebecca noted that his hand had moved from resting on his weapon to gripping it. Not drawn, but ready. She reached across, slowly, grabbed her purse, and pulled out her wallet. She extracted her driver's license, her real one, Oregon issued, with her real name, and the vehicle registration. She handed them through the window. Pate took them, shining his flashlight on the license. He read the name aloud. Rebecca Drago. He looked at the address. Portland. Long way from home at midnight. I'm returning from a work conference in Salem, Rebecca said. All true. What kind of work you do? Pate asked, still holding her documents, not walking back to his car to run them. I'm a federal employee, Rebecca said carefully. Federal employee, Pate repeated, and there was something mocking in his tone. Doing what? You a mailman? I work for the Department of Justice. Pate's expression shifted slightly, not intimidated, but intrigued, like a cat that had just noticed the mouse was putting up a fight. Justice Department, he said. Fancy. You a lawyer? I'm an investigator. An investigator, Pate echoed. He looked at her car, at her clothes, at her face. This your car? Yes. You got proof of that? Registration says it's a rental. It's a work rental, Rebecca said. The documentation is in the glove box. Open it. Rebecca hesitated. This was the decision point. She could comply. Open the glove box. Show him the rental agreement. Continue playing the role of cooperative citizen. Or she could assert her rights and see how he responded. She chose the latter. Officer, I'd like to see your supervisor, Rebecca said. Pate went very still. What did you say? I'm asking to speak with your supervisor. This stop lacks probable cause. You've refused to explain the reason for the stop, and you're now asking to search my vehicle without cause. I'm within my rights to request a supervisor. You think you're a lawyer? Pate's voice had gone cold. I think I know my rights. Your rights, Pate said slowly, are whatever I say they are on my highway. Now open the glove box or step out of the car. Rebecca looked at him steadily. I'm going to show you something, Officer Pate. She said his name deliberately, reading it off his nameplate. I'm reaching for my credentials. They're in the center console. Are you comfortable with that? Credentials? Pate's hand tightened on his weapon. Rebecca moved slowly, deliberately. She opened the center console and pulled out the black leather credential case. She flipped it open, holding it up to the window, so the dome light from her car illuminated it clearly. On the left side, her photo ID. On the right side, the gold FBI badge, eagle and scales gleaming. My name is Special Agent Rebecca Drago, she said quietly. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Civil Rights Division. Badge number 8847. I am a federal law enforcement officer. This stop is being recorded on multiple devices. I need you to step back from the vehicle and call your supervisor. For 3 seconds, Officer Anthony Pate stared at the badge. Then he started laughing. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a genuine, belly-deep laugh of disbelief and contempt. Oh, that's good, Pate said, wiping his eyes with his free hand. That's real good. Where'd you get that? Amazon? Etsy? It looks pretty official, I'll give you that. You need to get out of the need to. You need to get out of the car, Pate interrupted, his laughter cutting off abruptly. Because impersonating a federal officer is a felony, and you just confessed to it on my dash cam. He reached for the door handle, and that's when Rebecca made the call that would change everything. She hit the speed dial button on her steering wheel. The car's Bluetooth connected instantly, and the call went through the speakers. It rang once. Drago, we see you, a voice said. Male, urgent, professional. Tactical is moving. ETA 6 minutes. Pate froze, his hand on the door handle, staring at the speaker in Rebecca's dashboard. "Dispatch, this is Special Agent Drago," Rebecca said calmly, keeping her eyes on Pate. "I've been stopped by Officer Anthony Pate, Washington County Sheriff, badge number 2847, on Highway 26 at mile marker 34. Officer has refused to acknowledge federal credentials, requesting immediate supervisor response and full tactical backup. Copy, Agent Drago. Backup en route. Stay on the line." Pate stepped back from the car, his face going pale. He looked up at the fog, as if he could see through it to whatever was coming. And then, faint but growing louder, came a sound that made his blood run cold, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors cutting through the night. Rebecca lowered her window the rest of the way and looked at Officer Pate. "Still think it's fake?" she asked. The sound of the helicopter was unmistakable now, a rhythmic whoomp 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 that vibrated in the chest cavity and made the fog swirl in chaotic eddies. Officer Anthony Pate stood frozen on the shoulder of Highway 26, his hand hovering near his weapon, his face cycling through emotions faster than he could process them: confusion, denial, anger, and finally, the first cold finger of fear. Rebecca Drago remained in the driver's seat, both hands visible on the steering wheel, her expression neutral. The Bluetooth call was still connected, the line open, and she could hear the controlled chaos of the FBI's Tactical Operations Center in the background. Voices calling coordinates, engines revving, orders being given with military precision. "Agent Drago, hold position," the voice on the line said. That was SAC, Special Agent in Charge, Marcus Reeves, her direct supervisor. "So air support has visual on your location. Ground units 2 minutes out." "Copy," Rebecca said calmly. Pate's radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice, strained and confused. All units, be advised. FBI helicopter inbound on Highway 26. Multiple federal vehicles entering Washington County jurisdiction. Unit 2847, respond to your status." Pate grabbed his radio with a shaking hand. "This is 2847. I have a suspect claiming to be FBI. I think she's—" The helicopter dropped out of the fog like a mechanical predator, its spotlight igniting the scene in blinding white light. It was an FBI Bell 407, and the rotor wash hit like a physical force, turning the mist into a horizontal tornado, whipping Pate's uniform, bending the trees along the roadside. Pate shielded his eyes, stumbling backward. The helicopter hovered 50 feet overhead, the spotlight pinning him like an insect under glass. And then the ground units arrived. They didn't come with sirens. They came with presence. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans with federal government plates emerged from the fog at high speed, their headlights cutting through the darkness like search beams. They executed a tactical stop formation, blocking the road in both directions, boxing in Pate's patrol car and Rebecca's BMW. Doors flew open. 8 agents in full tactical gear, ballistic vests emblazoned with FBI in yellow letters, helmets, AR-15 rifles at the ready, poured out and took positions behind their vehicles. "Federal agents, Officer Pate, step away from the vehicle. Hands where we can see them." The voice came through a megaphone, amplified and authoritative, cutting through the noise of the helicopter. Pate's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He raised his hand slowly, his radio falling from his grip and clattering onto the asphalt. "This is a mistake," Pate shouted, his voice cracking. "I'm a sworn officer. I was conducting a traffic stop. This woman—" "That woman," a new voice said, "is a federal agent." SAC. Marcus Reeves stepped out of the lead Suburban. He was in his 50s, black, built like a linebacker who'd never stopped training, wearing a Navy windbreaker with FBI in bold letters. He walked past the tactical team with the calm, measured stride of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and knew exactly how it was going to end. He stopped 10 feet from Pate. "I'm Special Agent in Charge Marcus Reeves, Portland Field Office. Officer Pate, you are currently under investigation by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agent Drago, whom you just attempted to illegally detain, is the lead investigator on that case." Pate's face went from pale to ash gray. "Investigation? What investigation? I was just—" "Save it," Reeves said. He turned to Rebecca, who had stepped out of the BMW now, her credentials visible on her belt, her FBI windbreaker pulled from her trunk and zipped up. "Agent Drago, you okay?" "I'm fine, sir," Rebecca said. "Everything's on camera, multiple angles." He refused to acknowledge credentials, laughed at the badge, and attempted to open my door against my verbal refusal. Reeves nodded. He turned back to Pate. "Officer Pate, here's what's going to happen. You're going to be escorted back to the Washington County Sheriff's Department. We have a federal warrant, signed 2 hours ago by a federal magistrate, to search the premises, your patrol vehicle, your locker, and your personal vehicle. You are not under arrest at this time, but you are not free to leave. Do you understand?" "I want my union rep," Pate said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can call whoever you want when we get to the station," Reeves said. "But right now, you're going to get in that Suburban, and you're going to sit quietly while we do our job." 2 agents moved forward and flanked Pate. They didn't cuff him. Not yet. But their presence was clear. He wasn't in charge anymore. As they walked him to the Suburban, Pate looked back at Rebecca. The arrogance was gone. The mockery was gone. All that remained was the dawning, horrifying realization that he'd just made the worst mistake of his life, and Rebecca met his eyes and said nothing. She didn't need to. The door slammed shut on the Suburban, sealing Pate inside. Reeves walked over to Rebecca. "You good?" "Really?" "I'm fine, Marcus," Rebecca said. "He took the bait exactly like we thought he would." "You scared me for a second when he reached for the door handle. We were ready to go hot." "I know. But we needed him to commit, and he committed beautifully." Reeves allowed himself a small smile. "You know what happens next." "We tear that precinct apart," Rebecca said. "Damn right we do." The Washington County Sheriff's Department was a squat, 3-story building made of tan brick and institutional cynicism, located in Hillsboro, Oregon, 15 miles west of Portland. At 1:30 a.m., the building should have been quiet. A skeleton crew manning the dispatch desk, a few deputies catching sleep in the break room, and Sheriff Daniel Kovach in his office, pretending to do paperwork while watching reruns of old cop shows. Instead, the parking lot had just turned into a federal invasion. 6 more FBI vehicles pulled in simultaneously, flanked by 2 Oregon State Police cruisers. The state police had been briefed and were providing support. The lead vehicle carried the search warrant, signed by Federal Magistrate Judge Patricia Hong at 11:45 p.m. The warrant was ironclad. It authorized the search of the entire building, all vehicles, all lockers, all computers, and all personnel files related to Officer Anthony Pate and 14 other deputies who had been flagged during the investigation. Sheriff Daniel Kovach was in his office when he heard the commotion. He was 62 years old and 28 years in law enforcement and had been sheriff for 12. He was a large man with a white mustache and the kind of face that looked perpetually angry even when he was smiling. He'd built his career on being tough on crime, and even tougher on anyone who questioned his department. He walked out into the bullpen and froze. The lobby was full of federal agents, not just a few, 20. Some in suits, some in tactical gear, all wearing FBI credentials on lanyards around their necks. His night shift deputies were standing at their desks, hands visible, looking confused and terrified. At the center of it all stood S.A.C. Marcus Reeves, holding a document folder. "What the hell is this?" Kovach boomed, his voice echoing off the linoleum. "Who authorized you people to enter my building?" Reeves walked forward calmly and handed him the folder. Sheriff Kovacs. I'm Special Agent in Charge Marcus Reeves, FBI Portland. This is a federal search warrant for your facility. We have reason to believe evidence of civil rights violations and obstruction of justice is located on these premises. Kovacs ripped the folder open, his face reddening as he read. This is bullshit. This is federal overreach. I'm calling the DA. The DA has been notified, Reeves said. So has the Oregon Attorney General. So has the governor. They've all been briefed. We have jurisdiction under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You can cooperate or you can obstruct. But either way, we're executing this warrant. Kovacs looked around wildly, searching for an ally, for someone to back him up. His deputies stared at the floor. Where's Pate? Kovacs demanded. Officer Pate is being transported here as we speak, Reeves said, along with his patrol vehicle, which is being impounded as evidence. Evidence of what? Rebecca Drago stepped forward. She'd entered quietly through the side door, her credentials visible, her voice calm and professional. Evidence of a pattern and practice of civil rights violations, Sheriff. We have 17 documented complaints against Officer Pate, spanning 5 years. Complaints that were filed with your department and subsequently closed without investigation. We have victim statements. We have dash cam footage. And as of tonight, we have Officer Pate on camera laughing at federal credentials and attempting an illegal detention of a federal agent. Kovacs stared at her. Man, who the hell are you? Special Agent Rebecca Drago. I'm the one Officer Pate pulled over an hour ago. I'm also the lead investigator on Operation Nightfall, a 6-month investigation into this department. And right now, Sheriff, we're going to start by looking at your complaint files. Kovacs' hand moved toward his phone. I need to call my lawyer. You should, Rebecca said, because by the end of tonight, you're going to need one. The search took 4 hours. They started with Anthony Pate's locker. It was in the basement, in a row of dented metal lockers that smelled like sweat and gun oil. Pate's was third from the left, secured with a master lock. Rebecca stood with 2 evidence technicians as they cut the lock. The locker door swung open. On the top shelf, a spare uniform, a box of protein bars, a dog-eared copy of a Tom Clancy novel. On the middle shelf, 7 driver's licenses. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. She pulled on latex gloves and carefully removed the licenses one by one, laying them out on a folding table the techs had set up. All of them belonged to women. All of them were black or Latina. None of them had been reported stolen, because the women who'd been pulled over had been told the licenses were being held for processing and would be mailed back. They never were. Trophies, one of the techs muttered. Rebecca photographed each license. Then she pulled out her phone and started making calls. By 3 a.m., 6 of the 7 women had been contacted. All of them had stories. All of them had been pulled over late at night on Highway 26. All of them had been subjected to searches that went beyond legal boundaries. Oh, and all of them had been too scared, too exhausted, or too convinced that nothing would happen to file formal complaints. Until now. But the licenses weren't the worst find. At 4:15 a.m., a computer forensics specialist named Agent Chen pulled Rebecca into the IT room. Chen was young, brilliant, and looked like he hadn't slept in a week. You need to see this, Chen said. He pulled up a folder on Pate's work computer, a desktop that was supposed to be used only for official reports. The folder was labeled Training Materials. It was not training materials. It was a database, a meticulous, organized database of every stop Pate had made in the past 3 years, including stops that never appeared in official records. For each stop, there was a photo. Dash cam screenshots of the drivers, all women, all minorities, and notes. The notes were vile. See, they included descriptions of the women, ratings, and in some cases, phone numbers. Rebecca read through them, her jaw tightening with every line. "This isn't just misconduct," Chen said quietly. "This is systematic predation." "Print everything," Rebecca said. "Every single file. And make 3 copies. 1 for evidence, 1 for the U.S. attorney, and 1 for me." By dawn, the scope of the operation had expanded. 14 other deputies were flagged based on patterns found in the complaint files. 6 of them were placed on immediate administrative leave. 2 resigned on the spot when they saw the FBI in the building. And Sheriff Daniel Kovacs? He was sitting in an interview room at 6:30 a.m., watching his empire crumble in real time. Rebecca entered the room with Reeves. They sat across from Kovacs. Aku had his lawyer, a nervous man in a rumpled suit, beside him. "Sheriff," Rebecca began, "we've recovered significant evidence tonight. Evidence that shows your department had knowledge of Officer Pate's conduct and failed to take action." Complaint files were altered. Dash cam footage was deleted. Victims were discouraged from pursuing charges. "I run a clean shop," Kovacs said, but his voice lacked conviction. Rebecca slid a document across the table. It was an internal memo, dated 2 years ago, written by Kovacs himself. The memo read, "Deputy Pate's aggressive tactics are effective at clearing the highway of undesirable elements. Complaints are expected and should be managed through standard protocols." "Managed through standard protocols," Rebecca read aloud. "Sure, that's code for bury them, isn't it?" Kovacs' lawyer put a hand on his arm, but Kovacs shook it off. "You don't understand what it's like out there," Kovacs said, his voice rising. "Those roads are dangerous. We need officers who aren't afraid to be aggressive. Pate gets results. So what if a few people complain? That's the job." "The job," Rebecca said coldly, "is to protect and serve, not to hunt, not to terrorize, not to target women because of their race and make them feel unsafe in their own communities." She stood up. "Sheriff, you're going to be charged as an accessory. The U.S. attorney is reviewing the evidence right now. I'd suggest you start thinking about cooperation because the train has left the station. And you're either on it or you're under it." She walked out, leaving Kovacs sitting in the small room with the weight of his choices crushing down on him. The indictments came down 3 weeks later. Officer Anthony Pate was charged with 17 counts of deprivation of rights under color of law, 3 counts of illegal detention, 2 counts of assault, and 1 count of obstruction of justice for deleting dash cam footage. Sheriff Daniel Kovacs was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, and civil rights violations for his role in covering up Pate's conduct. 6 other deputies received federal charges for related incidents uncovered during the investigation. The trial of United States versus Anthony Pate began 4 months later in the federal courthouse in Portland. The courtroom was packed every single day. Victims, advocates, journalists, and citizens who wanted to see if justice would actually be served. Rebecca Drago sat in the front row of the gallery, watching. On day 3 of the trial, the prosecution played the dash cam footage from Rebecca's traffic stop. The courtroom went silent as they watched Officer Pate actually laugh, at the FBI badge. The jury's faces hardened when they heard him mock her credentials, call them fake, accuse her of impersonating a federal officer. Then the prosecutor played the audio from the moment Rebecca called for backup. The helicopter, the tactical team, the look on Pate's face when he realized what he'd done. One juror wiped her eyes. The prosecution called witnesses. The 7 women whose licenses had been found in Pate's locker testified. They were brave, they were articulate, and they described in painful detail what it felt like to be hunted. The defense tried to paint Pate as a stressed officer, making tough calls in difficult situations. They brought in experts on police procedure, arguing that Pate's actions, while perhaps overzealous, didn't rise to the level of federal crimes. The jury didn't buy it. After 6 hours of deliberation, they returned with a verdict: guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Pate didn't react. He just sat there, staring at the table, his hands folded in front of him. Sentencing came 2 months later. Federal Judge Maria Castillo was known for being thorough, fair, and absolutely unforgiving when it came to abuse of power. "Mr. Pate," Judge Castillo said, looking down at him from the bench, "you wore a badge that is supposed to represent protection. You turned it into a weapon of terror. You targeted vulnerable women because you believed they couldn't fight back. You were wrong." She sentenced him to 24 years in federal prison without parole. Sheriff Kovacs received 8 years for his role in the cover-up. Federal prison is not kind to former law enforcement. Anthony Pate was transferred to FCY Sheridan, a medium security facility in Oregon. He'd requested protective custody, segregation from the general population, but the Bureau of Prisons determined he didn't meet the criteria. He was placed in general population. On his 3rd day, during lunch in the cafeteria, a man approached his table. The man was in his 40s, covered in tattoos, with the kind of 1,000-yard stare that came from doing serious time. "You Pate?" the man asked. Pate looked up. "Yeah. Who's asking?" The man smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "My sister was one of the women you pulled over. Jessica Martinez. You kept her license for 3 months. Told her if she reported you, you'd make sure CPS took her kids." Pate's blood went cold. "I don't know what you're—" The man leaned in close. "Word travels fast in here, cop. Everybody knows what you did. Everybody knows you're a predator. And in here, predators don't last long." He walked away. Pate tried to request protective custody again. It was denied. 6 weeks into his sentence, Pate was attacked in the shower block. 3 inmates. They didn't kill him. They didn't need to. They just made it clear that every day of the next 24 years was going to be a reminder of what he'd done. Pate spent the rest of his time in Sheridan looking over his shoulder, eating alone, sleeping with one eye open. Karma didn't need to be dramatic. It just needed to be relentless. 1 year after the convictions, Rebecca Drago stood at a podium in the Oregon State Capitol building, addressing a joint session of the legislature. The reforms that came out of Operation Nightfall were comprehensive. Mandatory federal oversight of all Oregon law enforcement agencies, with more than 3 civil rights complaints in a single year. Body cameras that could not be turned off during citizen interactions. An independent civilian review board with actual disciplinary power. Mandatory reporting of all traffic stop demographics to identify patterns of racial profiling. But the most significant change was cultural. Across Oregon, police academies began teaching a course called the Drago Standard, named after the traffic stop that had brought down an entire corrupt system. The course focused on accountability, de-escalation, and what happened when officers forgot that the badge was a responsibility, not a shield. Rebecca was invited to speak at the first class. She stood in front of 60 recruits, young men and women who'd chosen this career, who wanted to do good, who believed in the mission. "You're going to meet Anthony Pate types," Rebecca told them. "Officers who see the badge as power instead of service. Officers who think they're above the law. And when you do, you have a choice. You can stay silent and let the culture continue, or you can speak up and be the change." She paused. "Because I promise you, if you become a Pate, or there's a Rebecca Drago out there waiting for you, and she won't be impressed by your badge." The room was silent. One recruit raised his hand. "Agent Drago, what did you feel when Officer Pate laughed at your badge?" Rebecca considered the question. "I felt disappointed," she said finally, "because in that moment, he proved that he never understood what the badge meant. He thought it was armor, but it's not. It's a promise. And when you break that promise, the badge can't protect you anymore." 3 years after that night on Highway 26, Rebecca Drago drove the same stretch of road at the same time of night. She was in her own car this time, a sensible Subaru, not a rented BMW. The fog was just as thick, but the road felt different. Safer. She passed mile marker 34, where Pate had pulled her over, and she thought about the 7 women whose licenses had been in his locker. All of them had been contacted by victim services. All of them had received counseling. 3 of them had testified at the trial. One of them, Jessica Martinez, whose brother had confronted Pate in prison, had gone on to law school and was now a public defender. Rebecca's phone rang. She answered on Bluetooth. Drago. Rebecca, it's Marcus. Just wanted to check in. How was the drive? Quiet, Rebecca said. Peaceful. Good. That's how it should be. She hung up and drove on into the fog, the headlights cutting through the darkness, the road stretching out ahead, clear and empty and safe. Officer Anthony Pate made a choice that night. He chose arrogance over humility. He chose mockery over respect. And he chose to laugh at a badge because he couldn't imagine a world where a black woman could actually be in a position of power over him. That choice cost him everything. But this story isn't just about one bad cop. It's about a system that protected him for years. It's about 17 women who suffered in silence because they didn't think anyone would believe them. It's about a sheriff who cared more about clearing undesirable elements than about justice. And it's about one federal agent who walked into a trap willingly, knowing she might be in danger, because she believed the badge she carried meant something. The badge did mean something, just not what Officer Pate thought it meant. If this story made you feel something, if it made you angry, if it made you hopeful, I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button. It tells the algorithm this story matters. Second, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Share it with someone who thinks accountability is impossible. Show them it's not. Third, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like this aren't going away. The fight for justice is ongoing, and we need witnesses. We need people who care. Drop a comment. Was 24 years enough? Should Pate have gotten more? And where are you watching from? Let me know. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing that sometimes, just sometimes, the system works the way it's supposed to. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And remember, the badge is a promise, not a shield. And when you break that promise, no amount of laughing will save you from the reckoning.